I had a bit of a back and forth with somebody on Twitter. I knew or believed I knew that the Supreme Court has never adjudicated on whether or not the census can include illegal aliens for the purposes of attributing or determining congressional seats. I actually didn't know that it could until, say within the last 5 years when it was the argument for why the Democrats would have left the borders open. They don't vote federally, but you count them for congressional seats. And so California, other states get more congressional seats by counting illegal aliens. When did that become a thing? Like, count census so you know how many people are in the country, legal or illegal, I can understand. I don't know, just from a preparation point of view, you want to know if you have 10 million illegal aliens in the country. But from apportionment of congressional seats, how in the hell did that ever happen in the first place?
Well, really, we're at different numbers and volumes. So this kind of was hotly debated in the 20s, and they passed the Census Act of 1929, which is still the governing law. What the Constitution requires is that it be done a census for the purposes of apportionment. You can do a census however many times you want. A census for purposes of apportionment shall happen within 10 years, every 10 years. Note it says within. It doesn't say only in 10 years. So first of all, as to whether or not you can do a census for apportionment more times than once, there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits that. There's no legal precedent that prohibits it. So that leads to the next big question. And it's to your point, in the New York versus Trump in 2019, Supreme Court said absolutely you can ask whether somebody is a citizen or not as part of the census questions. It did not happen for a range of reasons, including the incompetent person, in my view, that was at Secretary of Commerce at the time, and other issues that were taking place. But the other case that you're talking about, could they exclude illegal aliens from the definition of persons within the meaning of the enumeration clause, the apportionment clause? Then that question was not answered, because by the time the Supreme Court got around to it, it was after the 2020 election, and they said no standing because nobody has any idea what the Biden administration is going to do and whether they're going to enforce it or not. So that question is, lower courts have made up crazy doctrines to say you must include illegals in this, and we'll get into why that doctrine never made any sense by these lower lefty courts, but the Supreme Court never has. So the provision is an actual enumeration of persons, is for the purposes of apportioning two things: House of Representatives and electors. Now, by the way, apportionment used to be and still is constitutionally, but practically no longer used for this purpose. The other aspect of this was for taxation purposes. For direct taxation, we used to use a mechanism whereby the states would raise taxes and submit it to the federal government. And we said any direct tax has to be apportioned equally amongst the states. This is where the famous 3/5 clause came from, talking about slaves without defining them and constitutionally as slaves. Very important point that Lysander Spooner made in his unconstitutionality of slavery argument in 1840 with Frederick Douglass, that we read at vivabarneslaw.locals.com as part of our book reading club. So it used to have a critical tax component to all of this that now has been effectively muted because it's utterly impractical to do direct taxes. The only reason why income taxes exist is because of the 16th Amendment that says you don't have to consider the apportionment rule for the purposes of any tax. They called it income tax. Now, the Supreme Court has put further limitations on what that word means income-wise. Still a ongoing debate in the legal circles. So persons are, quote, the people of the several states. And so to read the clauses, first clause, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years. In other words, they were anticipating indentured servitude, by the way, there, not chattel slaves, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons, shall be made within every subsequent 10 years, term of 10 years, in such manner as Congress shall by law direct. The number of representatives, by the way, shall not exceed one for every 30,000. We've long since forsaken enforcement of that constitutional provision due to the same compromise in the 1920s that said we're just going to permanently keep it at 435 representatives. The 14th Amendment then modified this after the Civil War. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. So the same logic, notice the importance of respective numbers, counting, this is what the liberal courts relied on, counting the whole number of persons in each state. Here's the problem they're doing. They're pretending that radically redefined it. The whole number was simply meant to take away the 3/5 clause. That's all that's there for. It was not meant to redefine what persons meant within the constitutional context. The including Indians not taxed. Denied to any of the, and if any right to vote was denied to any of them, this gives you an idea of where they were, what persons they were thinking about. There should be no right to vote denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state. Later on, the later Constitution would add women to that. Being, there's, I don't know whether that's such a good idea to say. Being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, the same 21-year provision was later changed because of the Vietnam War to 18, or in any way abridged except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced to the proportion which the number of such male citizens as being denied. So what they said is, if you deny people the right to vote, we're going to deny you congressional seats. We're going to deny you electors. So then you have the Census Act, where Congress delegated to the Secretary of Commerce the task of conducting the census in such form and content as that secretary determines. There are some people out there saying, well, it references this. They're saying that is more limited and that can only be every 10 years, that's the only thing congressional funding is for. So President Trump has to get congressional authorization for this. I recommend he get congressional authorization for it, but I don't think it's required because I don't interpret the statute in the way they're trying to do so. The census is often asked about whether or not you're present here legally or illegally. Now, these clauses have been interpreted in 4 cases. The 2 cases we discussed, New York versus the Commerce Department, New York versus Trump. The other 2 is Franklin and Elkins. In Elkins, the alien students were being denied. This would be like if your kid was trying to enroll in the state of Florida. Were being denied in-state tuition on the grounds that they could not claim domicile because they were not yet citizens of the state.
Which is stupid, because you could be an illegal alien and still be domiciled somewhere. I mean, I guess the only question is whether or not indicating that you're illegal is going to be a legal exposure to self-incrimination or something, so they can't ask that question. But you can be a resident and still you can be an illegal alien and still be a lawful resident.
Oh, yes, and they were lawful residents. The question is whether they were domiciled for the purposes of in-state tuition because they could not have an indefinite commitment to permanent residency due to the time limitation on their current visa. That was the debate there. In that context, they made clear that not all persons are people constitutionally. And by the way, where has the left made this argument? Where has the left said the people doesn't mean everybody?
I want to say Second Amendment.
Bingo. So the left has constantly argued that people doesn't mean everybody. It only means the people as part of the political community. But when it comes to the census, they're like, oh, no. We actually mean it means every person that just happens to be there transiently. The other case, which was, I think, Edwards, which was that you have to have, quote, more than a mere physical presence to count as a person that should be apportioned for these purposes. Because this was about overseas federal employees. And what they did is they started apportioning them to different states. And the question was, could they apportion them to the states in the way they were doing so? And they're like, okay, whether you apportion them depends on, is it their usual residence? Do they have more than mere physical presence? Do they have an enduring tie to the place? In other words, a lot like the domicile argument, a lot like the people, that the definition of numbered persons historically, constitutionally, both within the language of the Constitution itself, how it was construed at the time of and all the people trying to reinterpret this they argue the 1929 debate about the Census Act. That's not what matters constitutionally. What matters is at the time they passed the 14th Amendment and at the time they passed the Apportionment Clause. And both of those provisions reinforce that this is why tourists do not count. This is why people who are physically not even located in the state do count.
Well,
like soldiers that are overseas.
I was going to presume also that invading soldiers would not count either.
Exactly. That goes all the way back to the birthright citizenship debate.
Yep.
And why the Indians not taxed is excluded from this whole provision. So the point is, it's supposed to be you get the people that are apportioned for the purposes of that political community. It's not just physical presence. It's not just, it has to be an enduring legal tie. By definition, illegal aliens don't fit that. Otherwise, you could quite literally Like, let's say you had a group of Democrats or Republicans. Let's say they just kept moving from state to state to state. Grow well, the census is doing it there next month. Let's all go there. Then let's go. You know what I mean? You could let's say you could inflate. You could just abuse this like wildfire. That's why a person can only have one legal residence, not multiple ones in the United States. That's why legal residence is about state of mind reflected in longstanding conduct, not reflected in temporary physical presence. And it has to mean something tied to the purpose and point of apportionment, which is what? For representation, for what? The House of Representatives in the election to the presidency of the United States. That should never have included illegal aliens. Mm-hmm. So I think President Trump's position is correct constitutionally. Will you never know with Roberts and Barrett up there on the Supreme Court, whether they'll go with the commies on the court, the left on the court, and refuse to recognize and respect this. But I think that he is constitutionally on the right path, and what's going to be relitigated again. Because if you removed illegals from the, not only that, people forget the census screwed up. The census put too many, accidentally screwed up during COVID. Well, we gave the liberal states more seats than they deserved, and we screwed the conservative states like Alabama. Golly gee, how did that? Just an accident, just a chance, right? It's like when the U.S. bombs foreign, media. It's like, golly gee, we hit Al Jazeera again. Whoops, sorry about that. So there's those issues independent of all this. There's the racial redistricting and issues of independence. There's there's matching what the Democrats do in terms of partisan redistricting. But the biggest one is just getting rid of these illegals that never belonged in the census to begin with for apportionment purposes. So I think he's constitutionally correct. We'll see what the courts ultimately say.
It's got to, is it not going to be the same risk in terms of no standing by the time this gets to the Supreme Court for a ruling?
No, because I think it will get there before 2028.
Is it not
late to do this last time? Last time he only did it like 2 years in, and now he's doing it right away, which is right. And who inspired it? Marjorie Taylor Greene, by proposing congressional legislation on this precise topic, encouraging President Trump to take action. Again, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a lot more MAGA than her so-called critics. Definitely Mark Levin, as Steve Bannon likes to call him, Tel Aviv Levin. That he represents the Tel Aviv portion of the district. So so now you're going to see this likely reach the court as soon as maybe next year. It might get expedited because of the concerns. And so now it might not all happen before 2026 midterms, but I could definitely see it happening before the 2028 presidential election because he's taken action much quicker. There's now already been extensive briefing on this. Supreme Court's already aware of the topic. So you might see it expedited to the Supreme Court. It would not surprise me to see the Supreme Court rule on this next year.
Robert, I got to bring up Mark Levin's post from Saturday morning. I mean, I thought the guy's account got hacked where he thanked Laura Loomer for exposing the kook Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then these are the replies to his tweet. Only thing that matters is whether you think someone grovels at the feet of Israel, right? He says, why do you hate America, pig? Ironically enough, if you call Mark Levin a pig, I'm sure he would claim some form of anti-Semitism. You're a moron. Morin, get lost. Bigoted putz, you're a bigot. Your mama leashed. Prison, pig, prick, Islamist. Robert, is he crazy?
Yeah, I think so. Because he's definitely. I mean, they're losing their mind. Bibi Netanyahu is pretending that all the criticism in the United States over the extreme actions that they're now recommending, taking over Gaza, turning it over to somebody that's not Palestinian, but yeah, I can tell you who they are planning on. They're planning on the United States of America. That they're going to expel them from Palestine. They're not saying where they're going to expel. Where are they going to expel them from?
No, where are they going to go? They expect the Arab countries to take them in. Morin, like Morin,
to do it. That's what they want to do.
Morin in Quebec is a very common last name, actually. Robert, we're not going to not only not neglect the locals community, we're going to get to some priority questions right here. I don't understand this, says Shailina. What is Trump doing, and how good is it or bad? What is this? 50%? Oh, this is the tariffs.
Yeah, this is just getting that for some tariff payments, there are people that want access to certain chips from China. So they are offering to pay Trump directly for access to those rather than require him to get it from China.